automobilia is really popular, and there is a fair number of books and manuals and different items on there.
I mean, if I had unlimited space and unlimited budget, less kids.
Yeah.
I want to tell my kids, do you know how many pedal cars I could have if you weren't here? Okay.
There's not big guys who do this. It's a bunch of one-person shops and family businesses spread throughout the entire world. You can order people to make you a leather upholstery for your vintage car, and you can do it right through our site. We've got some project cars on there, and that's becoming a more popular category. We have, I think, something that really makes us special and different is we offer new parts, new old stock parts, rebuilt parts. And the thing that I'm actually most excited about is we offer services right alongside the parts. Over in Europe, those folks, if you're a seller, getting into the U.S. market is a pain. Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, currency conversion and being able to put in shipping information that's in international format.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars with my new friend, Chris Bright, and I want to say it right, Collector Part Exchange. Chris, why don't we go ahead and begin with why we're Collector Part Exchange and not Parts Exchange? You told me a little earlier, but I think it's worth hearing about.
Yeah, well, we were going to just be Collector Parts Exchange. Sounds like the right thing to, it sounds pretty natural. It's what people tend to say. But we were working on developing the branding and capturing the URLs. And when we were buying the URL, we bought Collector Parts Exchange, and that's what we had started aiming our site at. And then in a flash, I noticed that when you have the S in front of the word exchange, it becomes sex change. And unfortunately, once you see it, you can never unsee it. So we just decided, let's stick with singular. It sounds a little awkward and unnatural, but at least it will never go into a whole other side business that we don't intend to have.
I think that was the right move. So the first thing I notice when I look is Ferrari 250mm motor for $380,000. So is it realistic that you can sell a near $400,000 engine through your exchange?
Of course. I hope so. We haven't yet done it, but I don't see why not. We've actually had quite a few people inquire about that. There's that Lamborghini that you're seeing down in the lower left.
Rolling chassis, yeah.
Yeah, we've gotten, that vendor has gotten numerous inquiries based on just our promotion alone, because they don't promote it any other way. So, maybe he sells it as a side hustle, but I hope not. Everybody that we deal with is pretty cool with we only have a 5% commission, so it's not too terrible.
Got it. Okay. Now, so you're an exchange, so this is not you buying or selling any of these parts or pieces or components. This is you providing a marketplace and promoting it so that a buyer knows where to look and a seller knows where to show up.
That's exactly right, Jeff. We are really just trying to create the inspiration for the business was the good old swap meet. So if you're a car person, you've probably been out to a swap meet once or twice, whether it's your local car club or some annual regional event or something like that. And it's always been a frustration. I have a number of cars, and finding parts is really inefficient. You can't usually get into a Google search bar and find what you're wanting very easily. So, but meanwhile, you can buy and sell cars freely online. There are numerous sites that will help you do that, and dealers and so on. But the parts side is really not that way. So the inspiration was a swap meet where we have this grand global swap meet on the internet where anybody who has parts can offer them for sale and anybody who's looking can find them. And that's the whole inspiration for what we're trying to do. But it grew beyond that because, as you can see, I've never been to a swap meet with a $380,000 Ferrari engine at it. So it's...
And I'm intrigued. Also, like this Daytona, like I was thinking, wow, if this thing had a VIN, it would really be worth money. And
yeah.
So if somebody needs to restore and have a legitimate Daytona, they've got a chassis with a VIN here, and it's
we've got this. My friend Matt, who owns the store Re-Originals, he's my new friend. I only met him through Collector Part Exchange, but we've gotten to talk quite a bit now. And he goes and scours. He's got a bunch of kind of pickers who live over in Italy that he's friends with because he used to live in Italy, and they'll say, "Hey, I just found this old uncle died, and we went into his garage and we found this old, parts and bits of a car, and and then I find out he used to work over in the Lancia factory when he was a kid, and so on and so forth." So he's got all of these folks over in Italy who find really rare and interesting parts that you wouldn't even imagine still existed. So he's been such a great supporter because he's somebody who sells professionally. That's his entire business. But owning and operating a website for someone who's a parts seller is kind of a hassle because mostly they're car guys, right? And they aren't tech guys, or they don't want to be SEO guys, and they don't want to be e-commerce guys. They just want to have a website where they can go put their parts up and have people find them pretty easily. So we really serve both the sellers who need a better internet presence because that's where all of the buyers are starting to go. And for buyers, whenever we want to do anything in our lives nowadays, we basically start it in a Google search bar. Whether it's an exercise program or a chicken recipe, you go into Google and you search for whatever you're seeking or curiosity you're fulfilling. So with Collector Part Exchange, CPX, we're designing the whole site to be very search engine friendly. So if you're looking for something specific and you type it into a Google search bar, the part that's on our site will present, in the first results.
This seems like a terrific social aspect. Are you already working on that?
Yeah, we're going to add on community elements. What I would like to do is basically become the de facto place where anybody who's restoring or repairing cars goes for information, but also advice. So, and that's something where I think the challenge when you're buying parts for a car is we're all used to the Amazon e-commerce experience where you find something, you hit one click, instant buy, and it shows up in 24 hours. And the buying parts for collector cars is absolutely not that model. That would be a recipe for disaster because what you're going to do is end up thinking you're ordering the right part and you're going to order the wrong part, and then you're going to get frustrated and have to return it and all of that. So that doesn't work for anybody. So what we really try and do that makes CPX different is allow people to communicate directly with the buyer and seller before, during, and after the purchase, because as well as I, if you have an older car, sometimes mid-run in a European car, they'll change an entire item or system on it. And unless you speak the dark arts of that particular that particular model, you'll never know that happened. So, you need to have that expertise on the other end. And that's really something that is important to it. So the social aspect is with the sellers who have a lot of knowledge, but also all of the people out in the community that could weigh in and, guide you along your path. A big inspiration for CPX was really Bring a Trailer.
Well, Bring a Trailer, I was thinking of that. Yep. And obviously, for some of the items here, they're heavy enough to auction. There's no doubt. And it's also very social. But when you mention parts swap, and naturally you don't always see a Ferrari engine out in the Hershey yard, still what goes on at these exchanges is a lot of car conversation that people really enjoy. And naturally, that would bring people to your social circle.
Yeah, no, I kind of look at it as a concentric.
Your social hub. I'm sorry, your social.
Yeah, and what we want to do is definitely have that element in there. And another way that comes into play is we have a system on our site called Part Ping, and if you're looking for a part and you can't find it in the store or can't find it anywhere, you can put a little submission in, and we'll actually try and reach out to our network and ask people if they have it in their stores and it's maybe just not listed or they know where it's at, so that we're tapping that knowledge base. And what we're hoping to do eventually is, if one of those goes out and we don't have an obvious match for it, we'll just put it out into the universe and go, hey, everybody, do you have this particular part? And I'm willing to bet that over time we'll get a lot of hits back, because most of the good stuff is sitting in the back of guys' garages collecting dust.
You'll be centralized. People will know. Let's go ask Collector Car Part Exchange, or let's go ask Chris or whatever. I need X, or I need to get rid of it. So I completely love Part Ping.
Yeah, as we've kind of evolved, it's, like I said, initially we just were simply going to have a place kind of like eBay, I suppose, because it used to be eBay did auctions, but we all knew they don't do auctions anymore. They just have become a marketplace. But the problem is it's really messy to deal with, and it's kind of, I equate it to going to the local mall to try and buy a very specialty car part, right? It's like, it's too big and it's not bespoke for the car community. So what we're trying to do is create a place where originally just people could go and list parts and other people could buy them. But now, as we've engaged and talked to folks, there's so many other opportunities to really become the center of this whole, I call it like the messy layer of the car business. Like, the whole supply chain is really, there's not big guys who do this. It's a bunch of one-person shops and family businesses spread throughout the entire world that have all of these parts. And that's what the internet does really well, is connect people, across different time zones and across different geographies to be able to find each other.
Is this your first startup?
No. I've been a tech entrepreneur pretty much my entire, or in and around it. And most recently, I was a co-founder of a software company that I co-founded in 2008, and we launched our product in August of 2008, only 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers failed and the Great Recession started. So we had to figure out how to survive pretty quickly. And it went from, we're going to be rich, to how can we even just keep the lights on? Hard times compel you to get clever and be smart and really focus on the things that matter. So, and the business survived and thrived and grew and became a category leader. And ultimately, we were acquired in 2017. And I stayed on for a little while, but after some time of being a company that you found and having it be acquired by someone else, I was looking for something new. And one of my executives at my last company was also kind of in the same mindset. So I said, I'm going to go start a new company. I have no idea what it's going to be, but I'm going to go do it. And if you want to join me, I'd welcome you. And he's my business partner, Aaron. And Aaron and I started talking about working together in the beginning of 2020. And we actually formalized the fact that we're going to start a business in March of 2020. So I have a really great timing of being able to start businesses right before global events happen that make the economy really terrible.
You might become an indicator. They might call it the Chris Bright indicator.
Exactly. Oh, Chris is starting a business.
Yeah, they know what happens around elections generally. Yeah, et cetera. Yeah, okay.
Move your stuff into gold.
Yeah. So, I know you're obviously an automotive nut. Do you have any cars?
Of course, yeah.
Well, other than what you're driving daily, what do you got?
So, yeah, I've been a car guy my entire life, and from birth. And right now, my daily driver, because I work from my home, I don't really drive very much, and I live in a city, so I don't have to use. I really don't drive that often. My quote unquote daily driver is a 1974 Alfa Romeo Giulia Super. So it's a really rare car that was only sold for a short time in the U.S., but they were manufactured for quite a few years in mass numbers over in Italy, and that's where my car comes from. So a fellow in New Jersey goes over to Italy, buys them up, and puts them in containers and brings them over, and I got one of those. So it's been great. I speak Italian, so all of the controls are in Italian and kilometers and things like that. So it's a pretty cool car. And beyond that, I have a 1989 Ferrari 348, which is kind of my modern car. And that one is it's a different experience, but fun all the same. And then I have a new one, which is I own it and it's here, but it's not totally across the finish line, which is I had a hand-built car made in Buenos Aires, which is a recreation of a Maserati 1956 Maserati 300S. So I have a huge fascination with the Mille Miglia race. And I think 1950s Italian sports cars, or sports cars in general, are the most charismatic, beautiful cars that have ever been made. But I ended up getting connected with this fellow down in Buenos Aires, and his name is Nestor Salerno. And Nestor is an old timer. He's pushing 90, but in his youth, he actually raced those cars, and he raced them against Sterling Moss and Juan Manuel Fangio and Carroll Shelby and all of the greats of the era. So when he was a kid, he was out racing sports cars in the South American circuit, and then he ultimately did go to Europe. So through this whole process, I've gotten to know somebody who actually raced these cars, and he builds them from firsthand knowledge. Great guy. Love him. He's like an uncle to me now. It's a little bit of a combo car. So the running gear it has a V8 engine from a Maserati. There was a car that ran in 1956 that Sterling Moss ran in the Mille Miglia. That was the car that mine is based on, and it looks identical to it, and it's built in the identical way. This is not like something where you take another car and slap a body on it. Everything is hand built, hand formed aluminum body panels, hand welded space frame. So it's really very, very authentic. And then Sterling Moss in the 1956 Mille crashed, and they took that car and took it back to the factory and straightened it out and dropped a V8 engine into that car, and it became the first 450S. So the engines for the 300s are super rare and hard to find. So this was an engine that I could get a little bit more affordably, and it's got great power and makes amazing sounds. I've only driven it probably about 3 or 4 hours in total so far, just on a couple of break-in runs, but it's the most exhilarating and exciting car I've ever been in or around. And I've taken some journalists in a ride in it, and they're like, yeah, I've gotten to drive original GT40s from the 60s, and this car is way more intimidating than those cars.
So you're a visceral experience guy. I mean,
your
Alfa, your 348, and now this Mazda recreation.
Yeah.
Everything you have is engine sounds and maybe some smells, and
Well, that's the thing.
Shifting.
You always love looking at these cars, but I think whenever I go to a racetrack and like get around those hot engines and smell the exhaust, or climb into a car and smell the leather interior, those are the things. They're so powerful. And the thing that really, like I said, I've always been a car person, like Matchbox cars, everything. I couldn't wait to drive. Even when I was 5 years old, I couldn't wait to get behind the wheel of a car. But the movie Cannonball Run came out in the late 70s, and there's the iconic opening scene where it's the Lamborghini Countach ripping down a Nevada, I believe, highway, and just sounds amazing. And I had never heard a car that sounded like that, and I have goosebumps just remembering that soundtrack.
Adrienne Barbeau.
Yep, you got it.
Getting out of a ticket.
Yes, you know it. Except for when she tried that trick, it was a female cop. That was the gag.
That's right. Not right.
She like goes and unzips it very provocatively, and then, "Hello, officer," and it's like,
right,
oops,
female. Yep. So, how old were you when you got bit with the car bug?
Well, like I said, I always remember being enthralled by cars. Like I was born in the late '60s, and the Indy 500 on Wide World of Sports was a national holiday for me. Like I whenever there was a car race on TV, I watched it. Whenever Evel Knievel was doing something, I was watching it. I was just fascinated by it. But I don't come from a car family. Like we didn't have our own shop. We didn't work on our own cars or do any of that. But which I kind of wish I had had that experience. But I just started watching, and then as I got a little older, I ended up picking up my Road and Track magazine and those sorts of things, and then getting subscriptions. And then as I got older and had a little more freedom to drive around, my brother and I in the summers would go to car races all summer long. We were little gypsies who would drive to Watkins, Glen or the Pocono Raceway or all over the Northeast just to watch car races. So, and I love that. And as soon as I was able to buy my own car, I was looking around. I had a little beater car that you have when you have a minimum wage job. But when I finally got a professional position, I was looking to buy a car, and I was looking at, a Honda or Toyota Corolla or something, just not very expensive. And I said, hey, I wonder how much a Porsche 928 costs. And I went, and you could get a Porsche 928 for what it costs to get a Honda Civic in the same year that I was buying them, because Porsche 928s have depreciated, but it's a hand-built, amazing car. And I bought one of those, and that was my daily driver for 15 years. I put almost 200,000 miles on that car before it was starting to get a little expensive. But,
yeah.
And ever since then, I've just decided, there's the old saying, life's too short to drive boring cars, and I have a freedom. I don't have kids and things like that, so I can kind of afford to have things that are a little less practical.
I can attest to how many extra cars I could have if I didn't have kids.
Many.
And maybe houses too. So how did this lead to launching the part exchange?
Sure. Well, like I said, I've been in tech startups, and the two that I was at before the one that I'm starting now, the last one I was a co-founder and, founded it on my friend's couch. And the one before that, I was in a company that I knew the founders early on and started working with them. And then I ultimately joined their company, and it was a semiconductor company that went public. So, it ended up being pretty successful. And then, after I left, I had another opportunity to do it again, and also was successful. And so it's like, hey, let's do something that I want to do something a little different. But my friend and I, who I decided to start the company with, Aaron, we literally went off into a cabin in the woods that I rented just to brainstorm, and we just hid away and got disconnected and just started writing ideas down. And we came up with all sorts of crazy ideas. It wasn't the intention to start a car business in any way. But one of the ideas that I said was, hey, these swap meets are crazy. There's 100,000 people that show up in Portland every year and traipse around in the mud to look at, old dirty car parts in a field, and it makes no sense. And, so I threw it out there. And then as we started whittling down what we were doing, what we were considering, we kept that one on the list. And ultimately we decided, while I'm passionate about cars, it's more important to have a successful business. And I think any business can be interesting. My last company was a legal software company, and it was completely fascinating, although my mother still never understood what I did for, a dozen years, the company that I founded. It didn't make good cocktail party conversation. But with Collector Part Exchange, while it's something that I am interested in and excited to be working in and find it that I'm really connected to it, it is a genuinely huge opportunity. we love our collector cars, and there's every year 30 billion collector cars are sold in the U.S. alone. And Haggerty counted it up, and they estimate that the total value of all the collector cars in the United States is more than $1 trillion in value. So it's almost unimaginable. And yet, trying to buy parts for these cars is really a pain in the butt. And it's hard for us, but more so for people whose job it is to fix these cars or restore their cars. So I've gotten to know a lot of restoration and repair shops who specialize in certain types of special collector vehicles. And they have entire staff people dedicated to tracking down parts. And that's just deeply inefficient. We've got a better way to solve this problem, but no one has ever attempted to solve it because it's not that easy. It's a really messy world of really a bunch of small businesses that are far-reaching and aren't that tech-forward. But one thing that, if you get to know me, I really like to do the hard problems and do the unsexy things. And there's not very many things that are less sexy than the collector car part business, because it's just a bunch, it's a bunch of small businesses trying to keep the cars on the road, but keep their businesses going. So we really, I would say, if I were to state our mission, really my whole job is to make the suppliers of all of these parts be able to survive and transition them into a more modern internet world and help them thrive and walk across this chasm from a phone-based business to an internet-based business. And because they're really the backbone of this hobby. It isn't the brokers. It isn't, the insurance companies. It's the repair people and the parts supply people who make this entire hobby possible. And they don't get nearly enough credit. They're amazing people who devote their lives to these cars. And if I can make them successful and build a successful business, then it's a win-win for everybody.
Well, I mean, imagine trying to get a pre-war, post-war ready for a Concours d'Elegance through whatever restoration shop and no parts.
Right. Well, and a lot of those folks,
they're not important. They're everything.
Yeah, and sometimes they get stuck having to manufacture the parts basically from scratch, and
right.
There's those parts exist, they just can't find them. And actually, one of the things where I was talking earlier about all the different opportunities that are spinning out of this as we engage with people, but in the future, maybe in the next 10 years, you can already do it. There's, how 3D printers works. There's 3D forges. So they actually print molten metal, and people are using those machines to actually print parts for cars. And it might be that you don't go find the new part. You go, I'm going to basically have somebody print an exhaust manifold for me for my 1929 Buick, and voila, it just arrives in your mailbox in a couple of days.
Well, we still need that first Buick manifold to template out to print.
Exactly.
So we still need some original parts.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing, kind of riffing on the whole idea of like helping the suppliers. Most of these suppliers, and I just came back from Hershey, and it's the story was validated. Most people who got into that business probably got into it in the 60s. So they were kids. They worked in a garage, and then they started running the parts department, and then they turned it into their own business. And I can't tell you how many times that's the founding story of a parts supply business. But you can tell by the timeline, these guys are getting to 70 years old, and they don't really have a great exit strategy. So one of the things that I would really like to be able to do is create an exchange where someone, if they want to get to a point where they want to sell their business, we could connect them with someone who'd be interested in taking over that business, or at least helping them find a responsible buyer for the parts. Because one of my greatest fears in this market is someday somebody's going to get surprised and pass away, and someone's going to honestly not have a clue what they have in their garage or up in the attic, and they're just going to trash those parts. And they could be literally tens of thousands of dollars worth of inventory sitting there that would just get thrown out totally by accident. So I want to make sure that doesn't happen, and I want to make sure that there's a good place where anybody who has parts that they want to get rid of can get rid of them. So we aren't just for professional parts suppliers, although we have plenty of those. We are also designed for anybody who has a car has about 3 to 10 boxes worth of parts sitting around in the back of the garage that is collecting dust and will never get used again. So, hey, why not get those back in circulation? And we've really built Collector Part Exchange to be able to help people do that.
So you don't own any parts. You're not selling any parts. You're not buying any parts. You're providing a place for a seller to get eyeballs, and you're developing the eyeballs, and you're developing a place for the buyer to find what he may not be able to find on a Google search, and you're making sure that you're indexing well enough or have proper content so your seller's parts get found. So I'm assuming that the seller needs to have some kind of storefront or something.
Yep, you're exactly right. So we've tried to make it as easy as possible because, as I mentioned, we're dealing with people who are maybe not so tech forward. So I joke around that our UI is really based on those jitterbug phones for seniors. We've tried to make it as dead simple as it can be. So to start a store, you just go in, create an account, and then there's a button on there that says create a store. And it walks you through the process. You have to give it a name and provide some information. And the thing where the most complex thing that you have to do is connect our payment system to your bank account. So when someone buys something, payment is automatically just deposited directly into your bank. And so if you're a business person, you have to set it up with your business information and things like that. So it doesn't take much time at all. Most people can get a store running within 10 minutes.
And is there a setup charge or licensing fee? What does it cost to start a store?
Absolutely not. There is no charge whatsoever to start a store, and there's no charge whatsoever to list a part. If a part that you have sells...
That's where you nail them. What's the fee?
5%. So it's, we've tried to make it really fair because I think that's not being greedy. And it also... We don't want to create a reason for people not to use the website, right? And I think if you were to ask around and someone said, oh, if I list a part and you charge me 5% on it, they'd probably go, oh, okay, that's not bad. Probably 10% could get away with, but 5% is like a no-brainer. And
$50 on 1,000, $500 on 100 grand, especially to be able to find a buyer or find a part. And you're doing this work to be relevant, and that's costing you money, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly. And we think there's enough market space to make that very, very successful for all parties involved. And I think one of the things that we've learned is people who use eBay, and we have a lot of people who use eBay and now are moving over to CPX because they've made it really complex and really hard to list parts, and it's really expensive. So there is a listing fee on eBay. There is a store creation fee on eBay. If you want bold type in your headline, you have to pay extra for that. There's just all these little incremental charges. If you want more than 3 pictures, you have to pay extra. There's everywhere in the transaction, they're trying to get a few pennies here and there. And that gets really old after a while. And the worst part is they don't allow you to really communicate easily between the buyer and seller. So we've tried to remove all of those barriers, and part of that is trusting the community.
Well, eBay, right. eBay, they're brokering the texting going on in between. It's going through their portal only. It's blind email or et cetera. Like maybe even Uber, you and your Uber driver going through their phone number. So you've opened it up based on trust. So I'm just assuming if you found out someone went around you to avoid paying the 5%, then they're just not a member anymore. I mean,
that'll be the end of it.
Is there any way to regulate it? I mean, do you?
There isn't. It's a. when you run a marketplace like this, the technical term is called disintermediation, and that all that is when people use a marketplace, then they go around it, and that happens in Airbnb is a marketplace. Once you've rented somebody's house, now you know who they are, and you can go, "Hey, Susie, can I have your cabin?" I'll pay you 10% less, and you'll still make a lot more money because you won't have to pay all those fees. And that's
normal, right?
It's part of the world. And like I said, we're trying to make it so that people don't have an incentive to go around us. They go, oh, and I think, the business people in this world kind of understand the game. And yeah, if someone refers business to you're always happy to take care of them. And we're just trying to keep it really fair and positive and make their lives better and make it better for the buyer too, because you want to be able to ask those questions. You want to know who you're buying from. You don't want to accidentally realize that, oh, shoot, I bought from this, guy over in Croatia who is making some crappy parts somewhere. I want to know that I'm dealing with this guy, Matt, who's down in Texas, and he's been in business for 38 years, and he's, his parts have been supplied to some of the biggest people in the car collection world, and he has a reputation that's sterling. So if you have that, then you have a lot to go on. And
are you going to add ratings?
Yep, we already have them. It takes a while for that to really have meaning.
Yes. Like I'm stuck on this $380,000 Ferrari engine.
Right.
So I'm not assuming we're going to get a whole bunch of transactions
right.
to rate, but you're already doing ratings. And how many stores do you have now?
Yeah, we've got 125 right now.
Nice. So, good for you.
Yeah.
And how long have we been open?
We're coming up on, we're just over 3 months old now. So
come on. That's fabulous. 120.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of interest in it, and we've got about $5 million in inventory already on the site. And, in time we'll get that to 50 million and 1,000 stores.
Of course. And I don't need to know revenue, and not that you'd tell me, but can you say how many transactions you've been in the middle of in 90 days?
I would say we're averaging about more than maybe a couple a day right now. So it's
90
not
days. Go easy on yourself, Chris. Come on.
Yeah, no, and I think that's one of the things that I'm in this for the long haul. And as I mentioned, I've started businesses, and I know there is no such thing as an overnight success. Like, I think people, I've worked around startups, and I mentor and teach and I'm very involved in that world. And I always get these new folks who are coming in, and they think they're going to become wealthy and an overnight success. And I've been around a long time, and there's no such thing as an overnight success, whether you think it's true or not. Usually people that you think are an overnight success have been at it for about 8 years.
They have no one has any idea what, right.
It's all about just grinding it out. You just have to have a lot of grit to be able to start a business and have the gumption to kind of walk through the valley of death for quite a few years, typically, to get there. So I think if by 2023 we're pretty well known within the collector car community, and people are starting to use us and check us out, I'll be really happy. It's not going to happen by the end of this year, and it's not going to happen by the end of next year. If you want, maybe it will, but more than likely it's not. Interesting.
And I want to circle back to talking about the cars, not the parts, because you're definitely, you're a car guy. The parts, of course, but the Alfa, the Mazda, the Ferrari. But is there a kind of car or a category of cars that you feel to be most collectible?
It's interesting. I just got back from Hershey, and I was at Monterey this year and all of that. The collector part exchange right now is mostly focused on European sports cars from the 40s to the 80s. Just as a starting point, we'll get into antique cars and U.S. cars and all of that. But I honestly think that's probably the most collectible range as well, because there are lots of different varieties of cars. So it isn't like, when you get into American cars, like how many Mustangs were produced? There were probably more Mustangs produced than there were cars in Italy produced in any given year, So it kind of becomes, there's very minor variations. It's like, oh, you've got a little different engine setup or a different transmission or a sports package or whatever. In the European stuff, there's so much variety that there is really uniqueness and differentiation within the market. So I think that drives up the valuations and makes them much, much more collectible.
So is your blanket answer European?
European sports cars from probably the 40s through the 70s, I'd say, and maybe 80s. And it doesn't have to be a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. My Alfa Romeo, I don't know, I spent $17,000 on it. It's not like a very valuable car, but I tell you, on my blog, I wrote a love letter to it the other day because I took it on a tour and it was so much fun to drive that car on that tour, even though it only has 85 horsepower. I think it really annoys me watching all these new hypercars and things like that. They are marvels. They are engineering marvels, but they kind of take the driving out of it and they become basically a marketing ploy for fast 0 to 60 times or Nürburgring laps and things like that. And you can't enjoy them in the real world. You just can't. Like, even if you go to a track, you don't have the capacity, I bet, to drive those cars to their extent. And if you try, you're going to pay dear. So
that's right.
To take an 85 horsepower 4-door sedan Alfa Romeo and rip it on some back roads, I'm going to be having a ball. Whereas somebody in a modern Corvette's just going to be cruising and drinking that cup of Starbucks. I'm going to be downshifting, blipping the throttle, pulling it, trying to carry momentum through the corners, and I will never exceed the speed limit, and I'll be having a blast.
Back to CPX.
You bet.
What else is on there besides parts?
Yeah, well, we've already talked a little bit about, we've got some project cars on there, and that's becoming a more popular category. We have, I think something that really makes us special and different is we offer new parts, new old stock parts, rebuilt parts. And the thing that I'm actually most excited about is we offer services right alongside the parts. So sometimes people go out and they search for a new part when they don't realize it, but they can take the old part that they have and send it to somebody and have it rebuilt, and it'll come back operating like new, but it's still the same exact part. It's a much cheaper price, and it's the maximum originality. So we've got folks who do that or build upholstery, like custom upholstery. So you can order people to make you a leather upholstery for your vintage car, and you can do it right through our site. And, another thing that we've got going on is automobilia is really popular, and there is a fair number of books and manuals and different items on there that I think are really fun, and I believe we're going to get a lot of pickup from people listing automobilia on there.
I like that. So it's it's your online exchange and I'm not trying to downgrade it, but automotive flea market. I mean, where you the automobilia, the vintage toys, maybe.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot of car models on there and dinky toys and all sorts of stuff. And there's when I see some of those come on, I get pretty tempted. And models, we just sold a very expensive model. Like somebody ordered there was a $750 model of a Rolls Royce that was up there. It's a 1/5 scale, so it's a really large model and complex. That's why it costs so much. And yeah, just sold. So yeah, it's fun to see those sorts of things on there, because I don't know anybody who's into cars who doesn't love to have, I'm looking at the wall behind you, and you've got, that ceramic car behind you and a bunch of posters and all sorts of cool stuff.
You're right. I love it. I mean, if I had unlimited space and unlimited budget, less kids.
Yeah.
I want to tell my kids, do you know how many pedal cars I could have if you weren't here? Okay.
You know it.
I'll make sure to remind them every day.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate that.
Yes. Well, all three of them know that they're my fourth or fifth favorite kid in the neighborhood. Have you been able to measure yet? And I mean, I know you have GeoIP information and you know where your customer is who set up a store, but have you measured where they are, your sellers and your buyers?
course, yeah. No, I think something that really surprised us, and actually in a pleasant way, of course, is the amount of interest we've gotten from international markets. So over in Europe, those folks, if you're a seller, getting into the U.S. market is a pain. You have to set up a website, and that has good English on it and transacts easily and all sorts of stuff. And we've got a number of vendors who are listing their inventory on our site as a way of reaching the U.S. market. So that's been really cool. And actually, the very first part that we sold on Collector Part Exchange was sold to a guy in Denmark, I believe. And so we've had a number of international sellers, but also international buyers. And, when I look at the traffic, we get, obviously there's folks from Europe who are paying attention, but more surprisingly or unexpectedly, I guess, is we have a lot of traffic coming out of Australia and New Zealand and South Africa.
South Africa.
There's huge car collector communities down there. And what's hard for them is they're isolated. They don't have a lot of inventory and sellers in their particular geographies. So they're compelled to find things outside of their own country. So, that's been really fun. So we actually, when we started figuring this out, had to put a pause on when we were going to launch and go and build out a bunch of currency conversion and being able to put in shipping information that's in international format and all sorts of different things. So we don't have full language translation yet, but eventually I'm sure we'll be able to have those sorts of features as part of the site.
How do people find you?
Yeah, well, we're at collectorpartexchange.com. So go check us out there. That's the first place. But when you're on there and you check us out, set up an account, or you can sign up for our email, and we send out a weekly newsletter. And I don't know, they're pretty fun. Basically, it's a lot of me talking about places that I've been in the last week, or riffing on how stupid some things are. Sometimes I rant, sometimes it's a travel log, sometimes it's a personal story from my history. But if you go ahead and sign up, and I would say go find something that you find interesting, and you can mark it and save it for later, like a car model or something like that. Or go ahead and just put one item in there. It doesn't take that much time. If you have the intention, go and do one, and you'll see how easy it is to do. And then you'll go, oh, okay, this isn't so hard.
What is your background? And you must have some background in writing, because your blog, I've enjoyed looking at it. We have Hershey 2021, No Country for Young Men, how I accidentally won best in class at a local car show. You got a letter, an email that I want to write to Penske. You got a thing about a belly tank, and it's racer, and it's good. You're good.
Oh, thanks.
You're readable, so I'd want to be on your email list. It's because you're not. Matter of fact, I'll put my email in, because it's not spam. I mean, it can be enjoyable.
No. Hey, to me, it's probably the most fun part of the whole job, is getting to share those thoughts and connect with people. I've gotten to so many comments and made so many connections through my writing that I don't know. I really value it, and I think it helps people get to know what we're about and what I'm about, and who they're dealing with. And, I think we've moved beyond the idea of using a blog to be like, go buy this or sell this or whatever. If you do that, people won't tune in. They just want to learn. They want to experience things or live vicariously through you. And, that's what you're doing with your podcast too. You're talking to people that they want to talk to, and you become their vessel for having that conversation by proxy. And that's what I try to do in the blog, is just, but I try not to hold back either. It's pretty authentic. I don't edit it down or anything. I just kind of write what I'm thinking, and here you go.
Any journalistic background or school?
No.
You're good. You're good, folks.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, thank you. That's very kind of you. I do enjoy it, and you know, I do have a marketing background, so language isn't
okay. Then come on now, marketing background for God's sake. Okay, so
yeah,
Madison Avenue, basically liar.
No.
Chesterfield cigarette. Okay.
Legal software. I can write about legal software.
So, Chris, we're good unless you have anything you wish we talked about or you're popped into your mind while we were talking.
No, I thought we covered a lot of ground. That was really fun.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.